All right, friends. I'm a minute late. I apologize. I was busy horsing around in the chat. Welcome, everybody, to our latest installment in the ongoing series of virtual UXPADC and DC UX community events. We're thrilled that how many of you are here? 33 and growing are joining us for tonight's session. I'm super excited about the panel that we have before you today to talk about becoming a UX leader, insights and advice from new UX leads. Right? It's a really hard transition, and I think the more that we can take lessons from those who are battle tested and have been there and done that, the better. So we're super excited to have them here with us. A little bit of housekeeping real quick. Tonight's program, the agenda, because of course we have to have the executive summary, the welcome, we're doing that now. Land acknowledgement, and I'll get more into that in a second. A little bit of UXPA shameless promotion, a word from our pals at Mediabarn, who have been the staunchest of supporters for UXPA DC for many, many years now, and we're very grateful for their support. And then our presentation and a little bit of Q&A after. So let's get right into it. So this is a new feature that we're bringing into UXPA DC events, recognition that where we stand today is in no small part a very complicated history, right? So just to sort of say it for what it is, UXPA DC acknowledges that our events are held upon occupied, unceded territory, the ancestral homeland of the Nacotchtank, whose descendants belong to the Piscataway peoples. Furthermore, the foundations of Washington, D.C., and most of the original buildings in the city were funded by the sale of enslaved people of African descent and built by their hands. We're very grateful to Dr. Gabrielle Tayak for helping us develop this language, and we're proud to acknowledge that the sacrifices of those who came before us are not to be ignored. So housekeeping, if you are not already involved with UXPA DC and DC UX on Slack, we encourage you to do so. It's a great place to stay abreast of events as they're happening, network with others in the community, etc. We would love to have you in the ongoing discussion if you're not there already. We're also always interested in bringing additional voices into the UXPA DC experience in whatever form or fashion might feel good to you, in the context of volunteering, whether it's participating in an event as a presenter. We're open to any and all who have something interesting to share with our fellow design professionals in the DC metro area. New speakers in particular are welcomed and encouraged. It's a tough thing to break into, and too often, if you're trying to break into the conference circuit, somebody asks you, have you ever been recorded doing a presentation before? We are recording tonight's, and we do that on the regular. So, and are happy to share those recordings for people who need them to burnish their speaking resume. So by all means, if you have something interesting you want to share with our community, please let those of us on the UXPA DC board know. By way of brief introduction, I skipped that at the beginning because I'm too busy jabbering away. I'm Rob Colenso. I'm a member of the UXPA DC board. Joining us as well on the call tonight are Asha Singh, who is our esteemed treasurer and who counts beans in ways that are enviable to those of us who can't count things for a living, as well as Jordan Higgins, our esteemed president and spirit animal. And if any of you are interested in learning more about what DCUX is up to and how you can get involved, by all means, email Jordan, president at uxpadc.org, or hit up him or me or Asha on DCUX Slack. Shout out from our sponsor, Mediabarn. Thank you for continuing, as I mentioned, to be the staunchest supporter of UXPA DC for time immemorial. Keith, did you or Nikki want to do a quick sort of rundown of what Mediabarn is and does?
I think I'll take it from Keith. I think that's what we had talked about, Keith, in our quick Slack. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki Kerber from Mediabarn. You'll get a 2-for-1 special from me tonight, both as a sponsor and
And do I
panelist.
need to make you a presenter in order to make that happen?
Yep. Can you guys, Rob, can you hear me? Okay, good. Sorry. There we go.
Nikki, I've made you a host.
There we
Hopefully
go.
that will help you.
Perfect. Yep, perfect. There was just a little bit of a technical issue on my end. Sorry about that. So I was cracking a quick joke. You guys get a 2-for-1 special from me tonight, both as a sponsor and as a panelist, which I'm super excited for. And I hope I'll do Keith and everyone on the Mediabarn side proud here tonight with my quick intro. But yeah, we're basically just a UX consultancy in Arlington, Virginia. So we're over by the courthouse metro whenever metro fully reopens, and you're able to come over into our office space. We'd be
All right,
more
I think
than
we're having technical issues. All right, so moving on.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Nikki.
Okay, great. Rob, can you hear me?
Apparently Rob's the one with the technical issues.
There, you gotta love it. Anyway, so yes, I'll just continue to do a quick intro. UX consultancy.
Did I cut Nikki off? I'm sorry.
In Arlington.
Okay.
That's okay. In courthouse. So for those of you that
I can't hear her for some reason, but by all means.
For those of you that are new to us, we are basically a full suite consultancy helping essentially our government counterparts and partners as well as our commercial clients. And we essentially do everything from A to Z in the UX design, strategy, and research fields or subfields or sub-departments, whatever you want to call it. We have a wonderful space in, like I said, in our courthouse Arlington office space where we have great areas for focus groups and usability testing. So if you're new to us, welcome. Hopefully once people get a little bit more vaccinated and you're able to meet us all in person, we'd be happy to show you around our space and talk to you a little bit more about how we can help you or how we can partner in some way for projects or other engagements, such as these wonderful events today with UXPADC. So Rob, if you can hear me, I think we're good to go to the actual presentation now.
Yes, I so apologize, Nikki. I was having speaker issues. They were a little hosed momentarily, but we have resolved that. So I apologize for stepping on you, and thank you, as always, for
of course
being an awesome human.
Of course.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So our 3 panelists tonight, Lauren Russell is a senior visual and UX lead for U.Group. Nikki, who you just heard from, is a lead UX strategist for Mediabarn. Yay. And Justin Kalaskey is a UX designer with Phase 2, 3 agencies here in the DC metro area who have been doing great things on behalf of clients around the region. And we're very grateful to have them here tonight. So if I can kind of get things started by sort of a little bit of a softball question, I guess, in a sense, but just to also kind of give everybody a little bit of context for what it is you bring to the table in terms of perspective on lessons for new UX leaders. If you could tell us about your first UX leadership role and kind of how you approached it. So let's start with Lauren. Do you want to go first?
Sure. My first UX leadership role, because I'm actually in it right now. As the pandemic started, we started an engagement with USCIS over at DHS. So I was not just UX lead on there. Basically a team of about 5 or 6 designers of various skill sets. So sort of just kind of inheriting people who were working with U.Group, as well as people who worked for other companies as well. So really kind of a lot going on any given day. Of course, you can kind of hear me like rattling, trying to sort of shift my brain from that work to you lovely people this evening. But basically, yeah, it's been sort of a challenge, a huge challenge, definitely, especially being in a fully remote space, and kind of this being my first role, understanding that I came from visual design, more of a graphic design background, and a lot of the things that the solutions that I'm finding, like I want to kind of present a visual one. But a lot of the people on the team have various levels of skill set, like from research to content and everything else. So sort of bringing in all the different skill sets that I might not be more like well-versed in, but also like understanding their work enough to understand how it will impact the whole thing, full circle, has been sort of the biggest challenge that I've been going through right now.
That's awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Nikki, do you want to jump in next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Nikki again. So, my first foray, if you want to call it that, into leading a team, a design team, a UX research team, what have you, probably was about 4 or 5 years ago at this point. Time certainly goes by fast, and I can't believe it's been that long ago. But I was over at DHS, and it was myself, my program manager, sort of the overall project lead. And it was a 508 specialist and someone that was very heavy on the development side for SharePoint. So two things right off the bat, at least at that point, that I had really no knowledge of: SharePoint development, which in my mind is just sort of like super technical. And even to this day, I don't really know a whole lot about it. But so I had the SharePoint development side, and then I had the 508 compliance side. And this girl that was on my team was just a whiz of just being able to go through PDFs and tag them, and charts and tagging them appropriately for the compliance side. And essentially we were all three of us were working with DHS to take this small microsite of sorts. I think it was called like the firstresponders.gov website that DHS had at the time, and migrate it over into the overarching DHS.gov public site that we all of us here can go to. And it was an insane challenge because, of course, as I had noted, I didn't really know a whole lot about, and kind of still don't, about the SharePoint stuff, but as well as 508. And so I very quickly learned that in my like type A, wanting to know everything of how everything works and why you do what you do, of just being able to rely on those subject matter experts to get the work done, but also kind of them letting them take the helm, or the realm, whatever the proper phrase is, of doing their job because they're the experts. But at the same time, like leaning into them, being able to give them encouragement, and allowing myself to ask them, at least in Nikki's head, silly questions, right? I think I often ask a lot of silly questions, and part of it is because I do want to know sort of what's going on, but also it gives me context into what challenges they may be facing, or potential risks to scope or deadline slippages, that sort of thing. And so that was just my really like aha moment, that I have to lead from a leadership perspective to let these people do what they know best, and also lead from a, where are we from a project perspective, and taking the nuggets that these folks are doing, of the skills that they're skilled in, and taking that information to the PM or whoever it was at the time, as we were going through that microsite migration over to the larger DHS.gov site. So a lot of lessons learned just from people management and letting people do what they do best.
That's great. Thank you, Nikki. And Justin, if you want to jump in.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that one up, but so my journey into UX leader role has been, I guess, a little bit more unique in that my first role was my previous position at a company called Web Mechanics. They're a digital marketing agency. When I was first brought onto there about 6.5 or so years ago, I was like hire number 14. I really didn't have a whole lot of experience under me. I was their only designer at the time, and over this past time, they've grown to about 60-ish people. So when I first started, I was like this just brand new web designer. I really wanted to learn more about data. How do people actually work with the websites? How do people interact with the advertising and the marketing efforts that this company is putting out? And over time, it just kind of naturally morphed into this kind of hybrid UX UI role. And over that course of time, I really started to help build actually the creative department. And I was kind of naturally just thrusted into a team leader position, seeing as I was the department at once, and ended up growing that to be about 9 people in total. So I had to figure out, okay, how do we hire for people? Where do the different skill sets lie? How do we build that up? How do I encourage professional development? What do the skill trees almost kind of look like if you want to take a gaming approach to this? And eventually, about a year ago, I was allowed to start the user experience department underneath, within the creative department underneath the direction of our COO. So with that, I really had to be forced to almost learn how to build an entire department here, something I had never done before. And it was like, how do I do this kind of thing? It's not exactly like you can just do a quick Google search, go read a Medium article, and it'll tell you exactly how to do it. But I eventually had to determine, okay, what services do we offer our clients? What are the costs of those services? How can the other departments help, especially the marketing department, which was basically half of the agency? How do they help with these things to be able to bring UX in more often? And how can we weave those services to be worked into the strategies for our clients, as well as, of course, charting courses for hiring. How does job progression look like? So it wasn't something that I naturally was chosen for. It just kind of happened to be thrust upon me in a voluntold kind of relationship here, but it's something that I really enjoyed and greatly enjoyed the privilege of being able to do.
That's awesome. Thank you. So interesting kind of common thread I'm picking up on in what each of you were describing is this sort of, I would characterize it as kind of getting pushed into the deep end, right? That it sounds like each of you were good at a set of things that is a subset of all the things you can do as a UX UI person, right? And now you're in charge. And you need to do all the things. And so and the thing that I'm thinking about is this sort of imposter syndrome, right? This, oh God, now I'm in charge. I don't really know how to do all these things. So we hear about it at every stage, right? And that we're not fully prepared for the role that we're in, whether it's, oh, you're a research lead now, or, oh, you're in Justin's case, building a department, or in Lauren's case, here's 9 people that are humans that you've never managed before, and you may not have ever managed anything before. Good luck, right? Have you, and I'm assuming you all have you felt the imposter syndrome, and how, and this is the important part, how did you get through it? And if you may not even be through it, right? Like, is that just a thing that's in our lives forever? You guys can just jump in popcorn style if you want.
I'll start. I have it every day. I, like, full transparency, I don't think I'm an expert really in any one thing. Of course, like research is my field. So anything that speaks to research to me, I get passionate and excited about. But honestly, I feel like I have imposter syndrome every single day. I've been in this industry for about 10 years now, and I don't think I'll ever be ready for that next stage. I really don't. And I think really what's holding me back is myself, right? I think it's just, I have self-confidence. I think everyone here on this panel and everyone that's participating, we have tremendous self-confidence, but it goes beyond just self-confidence, right? It's more than just self-esteem. It's truly just saying, you know what, I know that I'm not going to have all of the answers, but I will find out where to get those questions or those answers for you, and sort of understand where the best person or the best place to get those questions answered. But I feel it every day. So I don't want anyone to hear that's listening to think that Nikki has it all figured out, because I don't.
You mean you can't just flip a switch and
I
suddenly-
know. That'd be great though.
Embrace the unknown, really.
There you go.
Yeah, like I feel like, and I was putting it in the chat a little bit too, like the word lead came with a lot of like, oh, well, I need to know everything, and like everybody's gonna come to me with all these questions, and I have to like be able to, dole out answers and things like that. But it's actually really important to be vulnerable in front of your team, or in sort of like, okay, well, I'm the lead here, but like, what don't I know? Or like, frame assumptions as like questions, being like, I feel like this is the department that we go to get users. Have you worked with this department before, people, XYZ people, have you worked with this before? Because I feel like that will get people to trust you, because they're like, hey, you trust me to ask a question. We're all sort of here together, working towards a project, which is really like the core and like essence of UX anyway. So I found like that's tremendously like helped us to especially like gel together quickly in this sort of working environment.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah, for me, same. At the very least, it used to be every single day, maybe a little less often now that I'm not leading a team. But at the time, I really did feel like it was very much in over my head. Like I didn't belong in this position. And ultimately, what if I failed at building this department? How is that even going to impact the agency? How is that going to impact their view of me? But I recently learned that you can't keep comparing yourself to other people. You really have to compare yourself to who you were before and look for improvement that way. As far as I know, I don't know if this is an optimistic point of view or pessimistic, but we're all just kind of winging it. So you can't really rely on other people to have every single answer every single time, because they're just might be as lost as you are. So compare yourself to who you were in order to really start moving past that imposter syndrome and feel at least a little bit more confident in what you know and how far you've progressed yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Keying in on something I think that Lauren, you said that I felt like was a little bit of a thread in what you were describing, Justin and Nikki, as well as the vulnerability piece, right? Like, and we've heard Brene Brown talk about, being your whole self and being willing to be vulnerable and humble in the workplace. How did you each find that ability to be that vulnerable? I feel like that's the scariest thing in some ways, right?
One thing for me that comes up, because it's recent, is that you have all of these cross-discipline designers on a team, and we all have like swarm around the same problem, and we also all have a piece of paper and we have a pencil, so we can all sketch something. So I think that was sort of the great equalizer as well, to sort of provide space for everybody to kind of come together. But the caveat is, oh, we can only sketch and scan in your things, and then you'll have to present a hand sketch, and sort of everybody sort of relaxed in that way.
Interesting. That's very cool. Sort of letting the smallest voices in the room, the quietest voices, be heard in a way that matches the loudest, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. So shifting gears a little bit, the balance is hard, right? As somebody who's kind of a frontline manager, there's a certain amount of heads down doing and a certain amount of heads up leading that you have to do. And dividing your time between the two is definitely a deep end of the pool kind of experience. And finding that balance is hard. And I think everybody has their own strategies. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how to balance doing versus leading, and also your thoughts on what impact leading teams has done for you as a doer.
So for me,
go ahead.
When I first really moved into the UX building the department kind of role, it was after COVID had hit and everything shut down, everybody was home. So that kind of approach there had to be taken completely differently. As I was taking a junior underneath my wing, yes, I had been working with her for a couple of years at that point, but the relationship definitely changes because you can't just turn around and talk to somebody behind you, or just pass something off to them and be like, hey, here you go, here's how you very quickly explain it, and then off you go. So yeah, it was definitely very difficult to have to maneuver through all of that, and trying to find that balance of, okay, how do I have this open door policy with my direct report and basically everybody else in my team, because I was also like a team lead for the creative department as well as okay, I'm also building this entire thing. I mean, thankfully, working in an agency, I already developed this almost ADD kind of behavior where I can very rapidly shift mindsets. So that was absolutely helpful in that regard. But having that open door policy was definitely very helpful when it came to managing. They can message me anytime. I put time on my calendar, and I'll just work around it. My employees come first at the end of the day. I'm here for them and to make sure that they are progressing as they need to be, and then I'll figure out what my work needs to be after that.
And were you still sort of heads down doing at that point?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right in between any time that I wasn't chatting up, I was heads down in Word documents, Excel sheets, kind of work all of that stuff out, presentations, to be able to teach the rest of the agency what real UX actually is.
And was it a fairly radical shift for you in terms of, yesterday I was slinging pixels and now today I'm slinging Excel spreadsheets?
Definitely. I'm not one for Excel. Here I am, somebody who comes from a UI background that's very much, okay, I'm very good with the visuals, and I'll put everything like that together. And all of a sudden it just turns into very much a strategic kind of role instead. And that's a huge mindset shift that needs to happen there.
Yeah, for sure, Justin. That's exactly one of the things, because you don't want to, what you want to do, but it's almost like you have to sort of walk it back in reverse of how to sell that to the business, or even like your client, customers, everything else. Like, why are we making this change? And like, you can't just say, well, because the UI is ugly. It's like you have to be like, so that's sort of what I'm learning, like, as well now. And I find myself like pulling back on those like foundational critique skills to like really be able to sell to a client, okay, this is what was wrong with the, the previous team who had put together this UI. This is why we want to make these changes, as opposed to just like, well, we think it sucks and my designers need something to do, so definitely trying to like walk that balance right now.
Right.
And I think too, along with what you're just saying, Lauren and Justin, and it's actually something that I'm going through right now on one of my current projects, is this sort of idea of, I don't even know how to properly phrase it or how to like what exactly to call it, but it's like this idea of dropping little subconscious hints in conversation,
Yeah.
like throughout a period of time, right? So it's not just that you're going in stronghold with an argument of why you need to have like a design system or why you need to do usability testing or whatever it is. You're kind of dropping these subtle hints. Maybe that's the better way to say it. These subtle hints in various conversations, so that it almost appears like the client has the idea, but it's you that has been sort of, providing these little hints over this period of time. And I find that that's actually easier than, as I said, going in with these arguments and, you're kind of going down your bullet list of what you're going to verbally say or what your outline of your argument is. And so I think, just kind of massaging those strategic parts of, Justin, like what you were alluding to, is a really important skill, and it's taken me a good 5 years to really learn how to do it. It doesn't happen overnight. For me, it's been one of those things where I pick up cues from my mentors or how other people that I look up to lead conversations or lead workshops or whatever it is. And I'm slowly picking up on Nikki's own way of introducing it, because of course, no one here, like, Lauren, Justin, we're all different. We're all going to have different ways of talking and presenting. I'm finding out my own way to kind of drop those hints in conversation.
That's awesome.
Yeah, got to take on an inception,
I'm here, but I'm not here.
It sounds like for all three of you, and if I'm getting this wrong, by all means, stop me. But it sounds like a common theme is that when you moved into a leadership role, you were suddenly much more client facing than you had been previously. Is that true? And how were you expecting that? And if whether if so or not, how did you make that transition? My small humans at the door, so I can start talking.
At least for my position, I did not talk to as many clients actually. I mean, previously, I did have to talk to a lot of clients at first, but building a department, it's a lot more internal stakeholders. So talking specifically to clients, I'll let Nikki or Lauren speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would talk to clients, but it would always sort of come with maybe a little bit disconnected. Or if I was speaking to the client, it was because somebody ahead of me had already teed me up to go and like make the pit, like, okay, well, here's Lauren to show you like the screens for the new upcoming mobile, so it was a lot easier for me to be there talking to them like, okay, here's why. The thing that's like transitioning into the role is that they're not gonna like ask you to talk to them. Like it's about, I'm like, they're like, you have to come get me because that we have things to talk about, but you should know to come get, like, I don't know if I'm making sense, but basically, yeah, like it's not so much of like a sanitized environment of okay, like now here's Lauren to present the design. It's more of like okay, like what are your goals,
Right, like there was a box before, and now it's, oh, I have to navigate this relationship and it's weird and squishy and right. Yeah.
Can I weave into your calendar, or is this how you like it? Like, do you like to Teams calls, or do you even use, and they're like, no, I don't even use Teams. So you're just like, oh, okay, never mind. I'll talk how you want to talk. Do you want to talk over the phone? Great. It's a lot of different ways to be able to relate to anybody. So just use those kind of skills to be able to connect with them. And yeah, I think like that kind of goes back with the leadership things too. Like it's never going to be just one, you know, specific way to talk to everybody and this is how it is. It's like you may come across a product owner who's really cold, and so you're going to talk to them in a different way than somebody who's really open, or like sending you 19 emails at 3:00 in the morning, like trying to be your best friend. So it's like more of having this like toolkit of relatability, I guess, in a term of, yeah, to UX it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a great description. I mean, like if anybody who's, you know, been like Nikki in that sort of world of UX research, right, where you have to just walk into somebody's world and make it weird with really uncomfortable questions.
Mm-hmm.
You learn that sort of skill set of, okay, I'm going to relate to you where you are, right?
Yeah.
And you're sort of changing superhero suits depending on the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lauren, though, I was laughing though when you said that, or something, you know, you said something to the effect of, you're trying to learn the different ways to communicate with your different stakeholders or your different clients, because there might be a different formality, right, to how you connect or how you communicate. And I'm just laughing because I have 2 current clients right now, and I'm sort of reflecting on how I communicate and talk with them, and it's like I have 2 Nikkis. it's like 2 personalities. You know, the one client that I work with is very formal, like very detailed, almost like writing out like a script or like a play through emails or whatever, just to be very succinct, but very detailed, very formal. The other client, we're almost like buddies, you know, it's almost like there is no client relationship. It kind of blends on that. I think what you said was like friends, you know, at 3:00 in the morning, texting each other. But, and it's kind of funny though, to reflect on that, for a good laugh, of course, but even my one, I don't know if I would call him a direct report, but one of the folks that are on that team kind of just said to me last week of, Nikki, the way that you talk with this client is totally different than the way you talk with this other client. Why is that? And I said, well, they're 2 different personalities. You have to be able to pick up on the way, of course, they want to communicate, Zoom, text, whatever. But you also have to you have to quickly sort of pick up on what the formality and what their tone is. And I think once you're able to match that formality and tone, that sets you, I guess that's like sort of sets you up for success in a small way, of connecting and being able to, you know, do the work that you need to get done. Because they kind of feel like you're on their level, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making sense here at all. It makes sense in my mind.
No, I absolutely get that. A lot of client relationships that I had in the past were very much kind of like a friendly kind of thing. I mean, the agency that I was a part of was, you know, relatively young. You know, people came to them for a reason. They were expecting like these big, bold ideas, and were very open to that kind of thing. But then, of course, you get the kind of relationship every now and then where the AM on the account decides to bring you in, and then they throw you completely under the bus, and you have this really rocky relationship from the get-go with this client, and you have to figure out, how do I maneuver around all of this to be able to bring them back to my side here, without, of course, you know, throwing the AM back under the bus as well, as much as you really want to.
Come on, throw them, Justin, throw them. No, but that's, I mean, that's weird, right? Like this is the sort of, and I'm a little bit sort of wide-eyed babe in the woods myself, because I, for the first time in my way longer than I want to admit career, am on the agency side. I've been in enterprise before that. And as the guy, talk about imposter syndrome, right? Leading design, leading product for an agency when I've never been in an agency setting before. But dealing with the sales rep, the account manager, whatever, right? Where there's so many different conversations happening with the client that you walk into as the manager and go, okay, I have to both thread the needle with the client with my AM and with my user, who's the most important person. And the AM just wants me to get it done and do the thing the client wants. The client just wants it. I just want it to pop. Right? That font looks too prisony, whatever, right? Like this sort of random stuff clients. And you're trying to find your way through that to say, hey, but there's the user. There's the user, right? And there's a delicacy there. And I think what I've always kind of described as the ability to lead through influence. And I can't remember which one of you was talking about this, and I apologize for not being able to give credit where credit's due, but that idea of planting seeds and planting hints, right? And is that something each of you expected walking in, or was that sort of, oh, I touched the stove and now I have welts on my hand to learn from it?
So I was the one, Rob, that sort of
yes,
that said it. And planting the seeds was the phrase I was trying to think of, but I was thinking of just hints, right?
Yeah.
But no, I didn't expect that at all. And I think it's because, at least in my world, before I sort of came to management, sorry, my cat just jumped up, so my screen's kind of like all crazy. She wants to be very lovey-dovey tonight. And I think the reason for me why it was, I guess, such a jolt or not expected is because, at least for me, in my experience, I feel like in my projects, in my previous places of employment, like my role was just so like color within the box, right? Like you have a very particular scope and you have a very particular role, and we're going to ask you to do wireframes, or we're going to ask you to do facilitation, or like whatever the deliverable is. Right. And so you're not really privy to those strategy level conversations until it is your time to either listen to those strategy level conversations, like as an observer or a fly in the wall, or even worse, you're asked to then lead a strategy call. And so, you know, a lot of my sort of welts or bruises, if you will, stem from just saying, hey, we should do X, Y, Z, and here's why. And, you know, can we do it like next month? Or, you know, just sort of being, you know, the Nikki way of like, let's just get it done now because I want to just keep moving and moving, which is not the case in government world for all of you folks that are listening and are in government contracting. Can't just do it tomorrow. But yeah, so I think that was a lot of where there was a huge disconnect for me. It wasn't until I was part of those conversations or allowed to be in those conversations that I was starting to pick up kind of what was happening. But even when you're in the spot of leading those strategy conversations, it's really hard because you don't really have someone there saying, okay, this is how you do it. This is how you plant a seed. We'll come back next month for another call and drop the same hint again, but in different words, like different words or phrasing or whatever. Like no one's showing you how to do that. And you can't really have anyone to do that either, because like, how do you teach that? It's kind of a weird, it's a weird thing to teach in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Lauren, Justin, any kind of additional perspective on that?
So much.
I know we could talk for 2 hours about that one alone, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of like spaghetti throwing, like at the beginning. I just threw anything at the wall, just like, okay, what about the search? Do you want advanced search? No. Okay. Do you want, you know, just anything just to sort of get the ball rolling? Right. And, you know, one of those things will stick. And like, you just have to sort of keep going and like also keep like, realize that people, they are going to be like, no. And like, I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, UXers, design, like clients like to really make it hard on us. So just sort of embrace that and like, you know, get comfortable with that. Like, and it's almost for me become a little bit of a game, like not with this current situation, but to me, like I almost expect it, like, okay, the client is going to think I'm just like a, you know, touchy artist. So great. I'll just go in and like realize that that's, you know, kind of play into that a little bit and be like, okay, I'm really not that way, and like do a complete like 180 for them. And then,
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's this sort of double-edged sword that we get to lean on the, Well, it depends, right? Like how often do we say that, right? And it's great because it's this thing you can lean on, but they can kick that crutch out from under you in a heartbeat, right? Because
Mhm.
if you don't have analytics behind it depends, then you're suddenly laying on the mat going, whoa, why am I suddenly bending to your angry font discussion? Right?
Mhm.
It's not only
Yeah, it's
analytics, but it's also just like technical capabilities as well. So my welts and bruises kind of stem from telling clients, "Hey, yeah, we can do X, Y, and Z," and then afterwards I go to my developer and he's like, "Excuse me, we need like double the budget if we're gonna do that." So then you have to go back to the client, apologize, be like, no, sorry, we can't actually do that. And,
right.
it does sour the relationship to some kind of extent, but as long as
Sure.
you kind of navigate it as well as you can,
Yeah.
you can try to, generally get it back.
Right.
But it really shows it's very important that, yes, you kind of do have to be confident in saying, you know what, I don't know that. I'm going to
Mhm.
go ask for help. I'm going to go ask somebody else who does know that, and
Mhm.
I'll get back to you.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
I
you
mean,
know,
it's vulnerability, right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely very important to be able to have, and I guess it kind of goes back to that, imposter syndrome as well.
Mhm.
Uh,
Right.
be confident in what you do know, and it's okay to know what you don't.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right. And if nothing else, to look at the client and go, God, that is a really interesting question.
Mhm.
I do that all the time.
And then a
That's a good
follow-up is
question.
the follow-up is to propose like a 6-week research like plan
Yes.
for
You are the smartest person I've ever seen.
now we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so the, and I'm interested in just what you guys are describing right now, because this is like me getting on a soapbox for a second, and like the old guy's going to yell at clouds for a moment, but the we take people in this industry and in many others besides, right? And because they are good at a technical thing, you write really good HTML. You are really good at moving pixels around on pages. You are a incisive researcher, whatever. We're going to put you in charge. And then they push us into the deep end of the pool with generally little to no training, right? Did any of you did you have any inkling or coaching before you stepped into your leadership roles?
No.
Laura's shaking her head.
So I actually did go through a traditional manager training
Wow,
about a year or so before I became an actual manager.
you are
Just
cool.
because the agency or leadership was predicting I would move into that role anyway.
Okay.
So they just
Wow. Okay.
they believe it's going to just go through this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't feel like I learned much
Interesting.
from it.
Mhm.
When I first began at Web Mechanics, I didn't have a creative director for 3 years
Wow.
there.
Okay.
And I felt like I had to kind of become the person that I wanted to look up to.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I guess I guess right on that. But in general, I really just felt like at the end of the day, don't be a dick. Look out for your team.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, for the most part, people don't leave a job. They generally leave a manager, or some level of senior management, as was my case for leaving. I had a great creative director when he finally came on, but it really was that upper management that ended up causing me to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually find that to be the case, at least from a lot of reading, where places like Facebook and Google are just like, hey, you've been here for quite a little while. You have great skills. Come be a manager, and then that designer whomever moves up into a managerial role, but they're not actually manager material.
Right.
So every manager is a leader, but not every leader is a manager.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We're gonna come back to that.
All right.
I love that. Yes, that's another one we could talk 2 hours about. Lauren, you had no training. You were sort of shaking your head, so you just got deep out of
Yeah,
the pool. Here's some
I,
water balloons.
I think so. But then I realized like the method, there was like a method to the madness, and like not
Okay.
like shameless plug for U.Group, but like
Yeah.
shout out to the, like, it's a great company. I didn't realize it's like, okay, we've already seen you doing these skills, or like you already demonstrate that you can, that you might be good at this. Let's like
Mhm.
try a little bit. Let's try with a little project. Okay, cool. That was cool. Let's try with a little bit more. So like, I think that that's kind of a good thing that sort of like take with you, is like, okay, don't promote people who like have been there for a while and like, okay, it looks like, you know, we don't want to lose you, so let's just promote. Like, actually look at somebody and say, okay, have they been doing that job? Because that's sort of like a low risk but also a high investment in somebody, because they've already been doing the job a little bit for a couple months, you know, year or so.
Right.
Shows me that we can do it, so yeah, put you in there. It makes a lot of sense. So I think like for me, I can sit up here and be like, they didn't, like, I didn't get any training or anything like this, but like at the same time, I was doing these things already, and
Yeah.
I'm already kind of like
Yeah.
a little bit good at listening to people or understanding, or like even
Mhm.
suffering from like being in an adverse situations and being like, okay, just be the anti of that, just be like
Mhm.
the inverse of, you know, just change that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think maybe for me, that's what they did. Um, I feel like I do struggle a little bit in terms of like just not managing somebody. Like, let's say, you know, managing somebody who has a little bit, who's been 10 more years of experience than myself,
Mhm.
and that being a challenge. But
Yeah.
also, I don't know that, like how Justin, like how you're saying, you went through the programs of like, okay, this is 101 how to be a manager, and you were like, none of that helped. I've also heard that as well. Like, we could send you to these programs, Lauren, but like that's not going to help you for real life, because real life just kind of, people get thrown at you and it's not in some chapter.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Right.
that kind of thing as well. Just having the experience and like going through it, and definitely having one-on-ones with people and just being like, hey, are we, you know, did you understand what I was saying, or am I missing something that you're saying? You know, a lot of those things to sort of like even out communication has helped.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like just in hearing you talk about your experiences with clients, certainly, but also with directs, that just being open, Justin talking about the open door policy, or in your case, Lauren, as you're describing, just being real and
Mm,
being really forthright and having those difficult conversations and saying, it seems like you might not have gotten that, right? It's so hard to have those conversations with people. And I think that's where, we all feel a little pushed into pushed into the deep end of the pool a little bit, because you, and I think your point, Lauren, is interesting about if you're in a good management environment where people are saying, okay, Lauren looks like she's got some potential. Let's put her in a situation where we can pressure test this a little bit. Or then we're going to put her in this situation where we're going to pressure test that. And both give ourselves a degree of confidence that she's ready, but also give her those experiences that you're going to refer back to, right? Like, okay, now I'm in this situation 3 years later, and I look at that and go, I've never done this before, but I've seen this and this and this that were similar, right? And that's kind of what we're good at as design people, is connecting
yeah.
dots. And I think there's some interesting parallels there that are fascinating. Nikki, how has
Mhm.
what's your experience been in that regard?
So I've had some formal training like Justin
Mhm.
from the management perspective
Yeah.
about 2 years ago at my previous employment when I was at Booz Allen
Mhm.
Consulting. And honestly, Booz Allen and some of those other larger consulting firms like Accenture and Deloitte and all those big ones, they have amazing training, right?
Wait,
And
who's this Booz Allen you speak of?
I don't know, and they have amazing training and opportunities for education and classes outside of their own sort of four walls.
Yep.
But to Lauren's point, there is really no true substitute for real experience, right? And it's kind of like for UX certification classes as well. I mean, that's another thing of like, or anything that you want to do, it's great to have the classroom theory or the classroom knowledge, but then being able to apply it to an actual real world project or your team or whatever, it tends to be two totally different things. Yes, you can take the theory and sort of the mental thinking and questions of the material that you reviewed or learned, but applying it tends to have a different sort of output, at least in my my experience. So I've had that, but the one thing that if anyone really is listening to me at this point, that I would say like my big takeaway for this whole conversation or talk tonight is get a mentor. Find two mentors.
Yes.
I say two, I say mentor from your industry. It doesn't have to be someone that's, within your place of work right now or your environment, but just someone that you can bounce ideas and thoughts off of that's within your industry. So within the UX community or design strategy environment. But then also someone who's totally polar opposite of that should also be a mentor. Someone that is kind of like what Justin and Lauren, you guys have been alluding to, someone that has totally different way of thinking, a different management style than you. Maybe they are someone like from a strategic communications background, or they're from a finance perspective, because they can give you all of the like management style things that you're missing. And those are sort of the pieces of the puzzle that you can place into your puzzle, right, of what you're building, that your UX counterparts really may not be able to fully give you, if that makes any sense at all. So I think just having that balance of someone in and without, someone in and out of your industry will be really helpful. And that's the people that are outside of the UX industry, I have to say, are probably the ones that I look up to the most. And I'm always going back to the well for questions, or like, hey, what do you think about this? Did I word this email right? Like what are your thoughts? And so I'm always tending to go to those people, I think, a little bit more than our own UX people. And I know that sounds bad, but again, it's just sort of getting that counterpart of the argument.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great.
I absolutely agree with that as well. From my perspective, I think it's really important to have a mentor that really understands business as a whole. And it's very important, especially within user experience, just because it is user experience, and you have to look out for the user. You still have to look out for the business as well, who, they have goals themselves, they have KPIs, they have metrics that they need to meet. So as long as you're able to start to understand how businesses run and how what you're doing is able to impact the business, what does that return on investment look like? That's how you can really start to make the most impact, as a UXer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like shout out UXPADC's mentorship program. Saying it exists. Just letting you know, putting it out there. But yeah, I mean, I love the point about having a UX mentor. Great, if for no other reason to just vent about effing clients, right? But also to like get legit sort of coaching from outside of your own leadership chain, because it's hard to be vulnerable with your boss when you're that middle manager that's trying to sort of show both the people you work for and the people that work for the people who work for you that you have your S together. I can't be vulnerable here or here. And oh God. But to your point, Justin, like just being able to speak the language of business, to bring in what in your mind, your heart, to be a user-focused argument, and use business jujitsu against them to say, okay, there's this thing that's really important for the user, but also we'll make it rain, right? Because we know that if we put the user first, the dollars will follow. But to be able to just sell that through, it requires being able to speak the language, or not, even not necessarily speak it, but understand it when it's being spoken, right? When just being able to say, so important person with tie on, what are your strategic imperatives, right? even just knowing that that's a thing that's going to make them, well, young person, let me tell you, right? Because I'm suddenly the smartest person in the room. Just being able to ask those questions, having that person who can help sort of give you the lingua franca of weird business people is huge. That's awesome. We're getting a little tight on time, so I'm going to kind of cherry pick from my questions. This one's a little bit of a hard right turn just because I like to do the Columbo thing every now and then. So you guys, you all, I shouldn't be gendered, I apologize. You all have been in positions where you have advanced into a leadership role in an existing organization. And suddenly you have people working with you or for you who see you in a suddenly very different context. Was that a hard transition? Like the worst case scenario is suddenly your best friend is an employee, right? But there's degrees of that, right? And I would love to hear your thoughts on that, how you navigated that.
For me, it didn't happen that way. It was like it could have, but it didn't, because just for the simple fact that we hired somebody that needed a manager that was on this contract. So that was me. So I think that that's how it happened there, but I could definitely see that being a little bit difficult. I was trying to think if there was any other time where that happened. Oh, well, I had another place where I wasn't specifically lead on paper, but like I had, you know, when you go and you're the only designer on a project and you basically are the lead, right? Yep. So working with that, and I was by myself, but then we were going to like expand the team. So it was a team of peers kind of coming on to work with this work that I've been sort of like doing for the past year or so. So that was a little bit awkward. I don't know that I came out completely unscathed from that one. Trying to think of anything constructive to say about the topic. I think, yeah, Justin, Nikki, help me out.
Well, I'm not exactly going to throw you a bone here, but since my department was growing at the same time as the agency was kind of growing, it just felt like a very natural progression. It didn't feel like I was just kind of shoved into this, be like, all right, you're designer today, you're manager tomorrow, right? Kind of thing. At the time, you know, I was already this kind of team lead figure within the creative department. While I wasn't directly managing my junior at the time, yeah, I've been a mentor for her for a couple of years at that point already. Yeah. As far as I know, she was appreciative when I did become a manager. And there was no other UXers within the agency really, so there was no one really to kind of fight that position over. So I really wish I could give some more real feedback on how to navigate that, but unfortunately that wasn't my experience as it were.
And is it the case for all of you that you've been leading in teams that are either growing or changing in size and shape?
Yeah, I'd say so currently. When I was thinking back to that other time where the team had sort of come on and I was already there, I had just gotten like a couple more resources. I think that there was a lot of, that's where I sort of learned, like, it's not just like things can change, right? Like just because this is how it was at the beginning, you know, many minds are gonna like create something else and like have something grow. So instead of sort of holding on to what it is and like, you know, well, this is what I've created and, you know, team, I'm the lead now. And this is what we have to do. I think it sort of goes back to like what we were talking about at the beginning of this, was just like sort of let go of the work a little bit, you know, or let go of like, don't like wear your title like right on, you know, your forehead all the time, because especially if you're like inheriting, if you've been promoted and then you've got peers under you now, it's sort of, or people who were your peers are now under you. That's tough, you know. So I feel like even if I were in that situation, I probably just would try to be as flat as I can be for a while. And pulling that rank card like never works really, like to say, hey, I'm director, so this is what it is. And this, because you better be right. If you're wrong, then why did we, what's the point? Why did we do that? So, and you've lost respect.
That's a great point. Like if you have to say because I'm the dad or I'm the mom,
yeah,
you're not making a good case.
Exactly.
Because I said so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I tried that with my daughter tonight and it didn't work.
Yeah.
She's 5. She's smarter than me.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I know you said that.
Yeah.
Pull that card. Like it's very rare when you need to, but sometimes like your team just can't make a decision. You're just like, all right, this is what we're doing with.
Right. Absolutely.
It works very well in that kind of thing. But when multiple team members of yours are like, hey, no, we need to do this, this way, and you're like, no, we need to do it the other way. You can't just pull the card because you're just going to lose the trust that way. Exactly.
Right.
Well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think if you build yourself up as we're all good at things and together we make something that's greater than the sum of its parts, I just have the additional burden of having to be the decider. And if you all bring me the right insight, I bear the burden of making the decision so that you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God.
Yeah, exactly. When something
Justin.
falls into your lap and there was a wrong decision made by somebody on your team, as the manager and the leader, you need to take the fall for it. It's not their fault. It's my fault for not potentially catching that or what have you. And you just have to learn how to deal with that as a manager.
Yep.
Do any of you have that? I'm building on the mentor question a little bit because mentor conversations are great, but they don't happen as often as we'd like them to. Where else do you go for insight, inspiration, emotional refills, whatever, on all things management, right? Because we all have our, I'm going to go read this person on Medium because I'm always inspired when I read their stuff about whatever design stuff. But the management stuff's harder, right? And like we were talking about having a mentor inside of UX and UI and outside, where do you go to kind of recharge your leadership and management batteries?
So I'll take this one to start off with. This is probably going to sound a little bit strange to maybe some of you, but I'm still really good friends and colleagues with all of the folks that I used to work with, either for or under, or however you want to phrase it, in all of my previous places of employment. And I always make it a point to never burn any bridges when you're transitioning out and transitioning into a new place. And so, of course, obviously the number of times you're going to communicate with that person will probably decrease over time, especially when you're first going through that transition out, transition in. But I would say I'm still really good friends and colleagues with all of my past managers or past supervisors, past leadership folks that, I would have constant conversation or communications with. And those people often provide a lot of great insights to me that, because they're not biased to the project or the people, I can just say, hey, here's sort of what's going on right now. What are your thoughts? What are your unfiltered feedback? What do you think? And so for me, I take those people still as my mentors. And so I kind of have built up this little black book or this little black list of folks, if you will, that I can always reach out to, and they'll always be there. But I think it's key to keep those connections open, and constantly just nurturing those relationships. I think especially now in this almost fully remote world that we find ourselves in, even pre-COVID, it's so easy to go do your 9 to 5 or whatever job that you have during the day or things that you're moonlighting in the evening for, and not have those relationships being nurtured. You have to be able to take time out, carve time out of your day, your week, your month, what have you, to continue those relationships, because that's I find that the more interesting insights come from those relationships.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
I really like that approach as well. But what I do is kind of more of a, I'm just gonna ram this train right into the wall. So I like to do this activity called stop, start, continue,
Yep.
where essentially my team gets into a room and they have a whiteboard with 3 columns. Here's what you need to stop doing. Here's what you need to start doing. Here's what you're good at. Continue doing that.
Yeah.
And they're in there for a half hour or so, and they just write everything, and you kind of go in and you just you kind of face it head on there. You're like, all right, cool. This is my reset. Now I know, okay, what I'm doing well and what I really am not doing well that I thought was working, and shift my mindset that way.
Yeah, that's great. And just being raw, like open enough to sort of take that, what could feel like criticism.
Absolutely, and that's very important for a leader figure, because
Mm-hmm.
if people who are looking up to you don't think that you're going to listen to them, they're not going to tell you what's wrong, and it's just going to keep boiling and boiling, and then they're going to leave.
Right.
But as long as you're open to listening to them and improving yourself, they are your users at the end of the day.
Right. Right.
So you need to listen to them and solve their problems.
Yep.
And become a better person for that.
Yep. Well, and I like the structure of that activity too, because it makes it a safer space.
Absolutely.
For them, sure, but also for you, right? Because we're not criticizing Justin, we're improving the process, right? And yeah, I mean, any of us who've spent time in sort of the agile software development world sort of see okay, we're gonna really scrub ourselves and be better for the next sprint, and it's not personal. Yeah. So this is, I know it's such an obvious question, but the answer is so squishy and amorphous that I'm going to ask it anyway, because we're all talking to each other on Zoom when we'd rather be in a room. And this is weird enough for those of us who are just doing a professional development event. How has remote management been for you? What have you found worked, didn't work, et cetera? I'm kind of going back full circle to something that Justin was describing in the beginning of this, where he mentioned that he stepped into his leadership role after COVID had started, right? But it all changed something for us. How has it changed you for better or worse as a leader and manager?
Oh, you want, okay. For me, well, I wasn't really doing this before, but I think that it's really helped me to, man, at the beginning, I was like, okay, if I schedule a meeting from 11 to 12, like I really need to fill this time. So I was like really like hard on myself to like fill the time all the time. But like now I feel like I've gotten a little bit more relaxed within that. Like I don't have to have like a complete agenda all the time. Maybe sometimes even just establishing, being a little bit more intentional about check-ins throughout the day, like will provide like paths for people to just kind of have informal talking, in terms of, as opposed to like just having a big meeting for updates like once a week or twice a week or things like that that we would normally do in the office. But kind of just like thinking of ways that we can like recreate those same interactions that we would have.
The sort of serendipity, right?
Yeah, it's been a little tough.
It's hard because you don't just run into each other in the kitchen, right? And how do you, and so much of that as a empathetic, emotionally leading manager is about those sort of moments of happenstance, right? Where, oh, I ran into you in the kitchen. Hey, now that I'm looking at your face, I'm thinking about something, and let's talk about that. And it suddenly feels like a much different conversation because you're in the kitchen rather than in the conference room with 11,000 other people. But over Slack,
yeah,
right?
One of the things that I found that was interesting with me and one of the people on my team is that we don't have like a fun non-work related thing anymore. But
Mhm.
what sort of organically happened was that I requested, or like I suggested like this show that she should watch
Mm.
over the weekend, and she was like, oh yeah, I'll watch that. And like she actually watched it, and then
Okay.
over the weekend we were like slacking about the show, which
Oh.
sort of like created like a little bit more closeness for us.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I think pre-COVID you would think like, oh god, this person really like slacking me about this show, like come on, we'll talk about it in the office. But like
Right.
it's it's this like other level of closeness that I feel
Yeah.
like teams have kind of created.
It's interesting, right? I mean, we've met Nikki's cat. You have met my daughter's loud voice. And next time we're all together, I'm sure you'll see her. But
Yeah.
yeah, and it's weird, right? Because we're in each other's lives in ways that we weren't previously, but we don't have those same comfortable formats, touch points, right? And creating those as a manager is so hard because without it feeling forced, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, oh, I'm just going to drop in to see how you're doing. Okay,
Yeah.
boss, that's great. Go away. I'm pushing pixels, right? And just the signals, right? You can walk past somebody's desk or cube or whatever, and oh, Jane, she's heads down. I'm not going to bug her. We don't know that in Slack, and it's so hard.
Mhm.
And I think the skills that we're learning now as remote by default managers are, I hope they're going to be translatable when we're all back in person, but it certainly has, it's been a challenge, right? Well,
Yeah.
we're at 7:17. And there's been some really good questions coming in from our listening audience out there at home. Can I throw some of their questions at you guys?
Sure.
Toss away.
All right. So let's, and it's, I apologize, we're going to be going back a little bit in the movie because I'm catching up on questions that have been coming in through the chat over time. But so rewind your mental videotape back to when we were talking about managing humans. And Carla asks two pieces that are related. One, how do you avoid micromanaging your team? And two, and I think this is interestingly related, so I'm going to throw them both out at once. How do you stop yourself from staying with what you are comfortable with in your design skill set, right? And keeping your UX tasks versus focusing on leading. So it's that sort of, how do you become a player coach, and how do you do that in such a way that you're not totally stepping on your team members because you've never managed humans before?
I'll take the second half of that question because
Cool.
I don't know if there's like an order. In terms of like in my, I always call it like defaulting back to what you're good at or what you're passionate at, right? So like my brain's always going to default back to research or testing or whatever. And so I'm always going to get jazzed and like super excited about talking about that. And I'll talk your ear off and like give my ideas, until the cows go home, essentially. But for me, being a great manager slash leader, and sometimes obviously that like a gray area, I am huge on just like creating a priority board, right? So whether that's a board in Jira or Trello or what have you, but just like basic PM kind of organization to your week or whatever your roadmap might be for the month, and helping your team sort of assess where are the priorities so that you can help delegate tasks out to
Mm-hmm.
your team. But then you also sort of have an idea of what's going on at any one point to have those conversations of, hey, do I need to help you put this deliverable together? So I'm with you, doing this stuff, actually creating the thing, or do I need to help you from a strategic level where I'm reviewing and giving you guidance and kind of helping you through it? I don't know if that answered the question at all, but that was sort of the first thing that kind of stepped into my mind.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and to kind of build upon that as well, you just really need to trust your team.
Mhm.
Uh, there's a reason why you hired them, and there's a reason why they're still with you, and you just kind of have to trust that they're going to do the thing. If they have questions, feel free to stay open and answer them for them. But to avoid that micromanaging and just being like constantly over their shoulder, be like, okay, go 1 pixel to the left, no, go that pixel down, sort of thing. You just have to let them blossom into who they're going to be.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that willingness to accept that it's going to be different than what you would have done.
Absolutely.
That's okay.
That was a huge
Yeah.
hurdle for myself to get over, especially as we started to hire more and more designers into the creative department, because I was used to just being like, all right, I'm the only designer, this is how it's going to go. And
Right.
now there are other people with other varying opinions.
Yep.
And it's not what I would have done. Maybe it was better, maybe I don't know how it'll work, and you just have to trust that it's going to.
Yep. Absolutely. I think that may be one of the hardest transitions of all, is to go from being a UX team of one to building a team, right? Because you're covered the hell up all the time as UX team of one. And, oh my God, I can barely breathe, I'm drowning. But I also have the luxury of nobody looking over my shoulder, because I'm the only one in the organization who knows anything about design. And if I have a reasonable degree of swagger, I can get just about anything through. Or I can get nothing through because they don't understand design and they just thought they needed one and they stick you over in the corner, right? I mean, your mileage may vary, but then you start bringing in people and, oh, God, you're doing that wrong. No, it's not wrong. It's just not what I would do. And that's so hard. It's so hard.
Mhm.
And what about you, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard to not want to step on somebody's work or do it over and things like that. But what I always try to remember is like stuff that I didn't appreciate, like as a junior designer or like coming up,
Mhm.
and things that I did appreciate from managers, and then basically do those things
Yep.
as well. Like so it's always good to like have a practitioner who's going into the manager role, because then like you really know what it takes to sort of to manage this person that was in the seat that you were in.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I think that, yeah, for me, I don't really like, it's you don't really like anybody looking over your shoulder, like saying, picking apart your work or anything like that. So really just kind of making sure that I'm not in the way of client feedback. Um,
Mhm.
I don't like it, basically kill it before it gets out the door, because even if like I can see through it, or poke five or six holes in it, or like just from experience, or know like, okay, man, that's really not going to work.
Mhm.
Sometimes, letting that work slide and letting the client see it and say, okay, it doesn't work for these reasons, and
Right.
having your team like hear that from like firsthand
Mhm.
will like make everybody much easier. And it's not just, you know,
Yeah.
centralized solutioning. It's just more of like, okay, man, like this doesn't work for a client because of these reasons, and this is going to actually make that person a better designer.
Yeah. I mean, God, what an art form though. Like, to
Hmm.
be able to make those judgment calls on, when am I going to let them touch the stove? Right. And not only because they're going to get burned, and that's good, right? Like, for all the reasons you just said, but it has to be the right client, right? And the right level of not good enough, and the right messaging from you to the client, the right delivery of the client feedback back to the individual. There's so many different sort of um, pieces that you're moving around to try and sort of make those gut calls.
Hmm.
That feels like it's one of the most kind of, it depends moments as a manager, right? Where you're sort of making those calls in the moment and going, yeah, I'm actually going to let the client see this because they're going to poop on it and it's not going to burn the relationship. And I can bring this piece of feedback back to the individual and say, yeah, they didn't like it. And I told
Hmm.
so,
And yeah,
right, without making the individual feel dumb.
right. And one of the things I also thought of too was because sometimes that can get really dangerous, that game, to put it in front of the client.
Yeah.
But you can always put it, if you have a huge cross-discipline team, you can always put it in front
Mm,
of a developer, ask a tester to come look at it, a
yeah.
BA,
Yeah.
and ask them to poop on it, because
Right.
then it's like it's safe, but it's still like, oh, other people don't understand what you're doing either. So,
Yeah. Right. Like the sort of how do you level them up in the world of hard but necessary feedback, right? Like your point,
yeah,
uh, a software engineer who's going to look at that and go, dude, there's no way I can build that.
yeah.
Or a tester who's going to go, I don't really know what this is supposed to do, right? Like just
Mhm.
those safe hard moments where you kind of go home and feel bad, but you're not, the contract's not at risk, right? Or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
don't look like idiots. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And this is like that sort of instinct you develop as a manager to know when that person's ready, right?
Mhm.
To sort of, okay, we're gonna let you touch the stove on low and then on medium and then on high. But that sort of thoughtfulness about like you were talking about earlier, Lauren, that the sort of realizing later in the movie that all those things that they had you doing as you were, going through this bizarre quest to go get the thing and the other thing and the other thing. Oh, you were prepping me for something. I see what you did
Mhm.
there. I'm
Yeah.
you. Took me a minute. So we got about 3 minutes left, and I'm looking for the best question in the mix. And I apologize for not getting to all of these because they're all so good.
Yeah.
Um, so this one is from Siobhan, and her name is not pronounced like it's spelled, and I deserve points for getting that right. Um, Asha coached me. What is the difference between a team lead and a UX manager, and how do the two roles work together?
Mhm.
I swear, if one of you says it depends.
What my face was saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that a leader in any sense of the industry, whether it's UX or development, what have you, doesn't matter what field the leadership role is in, is about sticking up for what you believe in and being able to kind of sort of die on the hill if at certain points, and knowing when to pick your battles and when not to pick your battles. And management is more like helping your team succeed and going through performance evaluations and helping the team set up good goals for the year, that where they'll still feel successful, and making sure that the project goes off without a hitch, as sort of as seamless as it can, right? So I think leadership is really what we all aspire to. And so, for me, it's sort of understanding what battle do I want to die on the hill for today or tomorrow, and knowing when to step back, but also knowing, of course, this is the industry of UX, and really our job is to advocate for the user, going in and knowing what we're advocating for and why we're advocating for that. So to me, that's sort of the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, very, very much a gray area.
Indeed.
Oh, well, I was typing, but I was just gonna literally say in just one sentence to I think it just depends basically because of the team, the way that companies are set up. And sometimes I've seen like design managers that don't really know, they don't have a design background, but they have like a interest in design and also like a keen like project sort of client whispering style,
Yeah.
which I feel like is cool.
Yeah.
So it depends on like the personality, I guess, too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it's as the team lead, you need to be who you are, and as the UX manager, you need to be almost a dad, in my case, uh, or mom or whoever you identify as. Um, there are times that you need to be just yourself and be very open and honest with your entire team and be a real person. But then as a manager, you need to know how to actually delegate and bring your team to some sort of cohesion there, and just take that kind of leadership role.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, we're at 7:30, friends. Thank you, Nikki, Lauren, Justin. This was incredibly insightful. I would love to be doing this in person over coffee or beers, but when we all have our shots, maybe we'll all circle back up again, all 35 of us or so that were in this room. So thank you very, very much. Any last minute announcements from our esteemed UXPA President Jordan?
No, nothing specific, although let me see if I can find it. One thing we are definitely looking for is we're looking for submissions for future events. If there's anybody out there that is interested in presenting, would love to see some ideas coming in. Let me see if I can find the link real quick. Sorry, I should have had this ready.
Oh, the event form.
But yes, I will say, first off, thank you to Justin, Nikki, and Lauren all for joining in tonight. I'm sorry I had to join a little bit late due to class, but I look forward to the replay.
Justin Jordan is in his off time warping young minds at George Mason.
There we go. Here's
corrupting the future designers of the world. So again, thank you, everybody. Jordan just dropped the submission form for speaker submissions into the chat, and I hope you will all join us at our next event. So thank you all for being here. Yay.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.